Preparing. Okay. Well, hello. Welcome to the January 2021 Gio Community Call. First up, I was going to give Elias a chance to give any updates he wants to about the project.
So now?
Yeah.
I don't have much. I have the new defer function in the op package, which should solve a long-standing problem of displaying modal dialogues and right-click menus and so on. And I think that the CRED project also wanted this for their own use. And I believe that you also, Chris, we had a longer thread talking about how to do modal dialogues and so on correctly. So I think this defer function will help you in that. But I haven't tried to implement modal dialogues yet. So I'm very keen to see anyone using this. I don't think I'll be using it for modal dialogues anytime soon. So I hope that the community will find any issues with it if there are any. And with respect to the new renderer, there has been some concerns that it is still quite slow, at least on low-end devices, such as Android phones, compared to the old renderer. I'm working on the CPU translation so that the new renderer can run everywhere. But of course, before we can even talk about throwing the old renderer out, I'll make sure that the new one is just as fast as the old one. So you don't have to be concerned that we'll kind of switch over before the performance issues have been fixed. So I think that's about it. So Chris and you and I talked a little about Gio example and the new repositories and the structures and so on.
Right. Well, I think we have GitHub mirrors available now for the Gio core repository and the website repository and the example repository. And in addition to that, we are now consolidating all of the repositories that have existed in Gio extras into a module namespace underneath gioui.org. So those are going to be available at gioui.org/x. And underneath there, you'll find the scroll bar implementation in the scroll package and the material design components I've been working on in the component package. And there's a number of other ones, but I am actively working on migrating those. So they're not all there. And there's, I think, some cleanup work left to do there. So maybe by the end of the weekend or something, those should be available for use. And I think we're going to merge them all into one repository that may export multiple modules. And then those are going to start using the same mailing lists as the rest of the project instead of like my public inbox on SourceHub. But yeah, that's not complete just yet. I think that's all that I have in the way of updates.
Do you want to say a little bit about what the idea is behind GUI/X?
Sure. Yeah, the X namespace serves kind of a dual function. Some of the packages in there are packages that ultimately we would like to move into the normal GUI namespace and the normal GUI core repository, but we're not as confident about the APIs that they surface or about their stability and maturity. So it's kind of a proving ground where new packages can go and be iterated upon, and once they achieve a level of stability in their API and adoption, they can be migrated into the normal Gio module. The other purpose is for kind of platform-specific functionality like, say, desktop notifications. Not every application needs that, and it pulls in a bunch of dependencies in order to be able to do it. So that may live over in X permanently, because not everyone needs to import all of these packages if they're not going to send a desktop notification. But it's an easy place to pull that cross-platform functionality from if you do need it. Yeah, so X will have some permanent residence as well.
You could perhaps say that the way to discern between these two cases, things that may go to core and the things that needs to stay in X, is that whether they have extra third-party dependencies.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. If it pulls in something, and especially if it pulls something in, but only on one platform, it probably is not. It does not belong in core. Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna hand things off to Sebastien to talk about stroked apps.
Yeah. Hi. So hi, I'm Sebastien. I used a little bit of introduction because we are not formally introduced yet, I guess. I'm a particle physicist by trade, and a couple of years ago I switched to computer scientists, or support for particle physicists, as a way of giving them tools, and that's basically why I went into Go, basically to provide tools for physicists. And so today I will talk a little bit about the struct path in Gio. And let me share my screen. Yep, that one. Share. I will provide the slides later on, the link to the slides later on. So everybody can see my slides. I'll take that as a yes.
I can, at least.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So basically, well, Gio and me, it's all started with these two simple use cases. Somebody asked me to be able to render LaTeX equations without having to install LaTeX on their platform, and to be able to render some LaTeX equation in their plots. And another ask was also to be able to provide a kind of an interactive playground to show some physics features, such as a little solar simulations, solar system simulation, to exercise some basic Newton and mechanics. So those were those two two questions, very simple questions for me to provide to physicists. And of course, my personal constraint was to do all of that in Go. So basically, at the end of the day, it was just to be able to draw things in 2D on your screen or on your PDF paper. So drawing in Go, at least in scientific Go, you can do it with Gnome-plot, which can show plots of graphics and functions and histograms and such. And on the Gnome-plot part, you have this vector graphic Canva interface, which resembles the PostScript interface that can move a pen around on your paper. But of course, Gnome-plot is just about rendering static plots without any interactivity or animation built in. So obviously, I had to go further than Gnome-plot to show, for example, LaTeX equations or solar system simulation. So obviously, that's why I'm talking today to you. I use Gio. And for the solar system simulation, I also devised a little package called Go P5, inspired from a Java library called processing, but I will talk about that later on. So, I mean, this P5 or processing stuff was basically just what in my school days, when I was a little kid learning computers. We had the logo language and a nice little mechanical turtle which we could program with some old French computers to move around in the schoolroom. And basically processing in Java was just that, but with Java, and now with JavaScript with P5.js, and well, nowadays also with Go. So with a group of people at my lab, we decided to use Gio and to provide a P5-like API to do such things. So when I came on the Gio board, Gio could draw outlines of shapes and fill those with some color. So I was quite happy with that. But for example, to be able to draw a solar system, you would have to be able to also draw the line describing the orbits of the planets, for example. So I needed a way to be able to stroke those paths around the orbits of the planets, but well, Gio didn't provide that just yet. So naively, you could say, well, once you know how to make a contour on your paper, on your screen, and then filling that inside of the contour, well, being able to stroke a path shouldn't be too hard. Well, turns out that it's not completely true. I'm just here putting the API of the Gio package, of the clip package inside Gio at the time, when you were only able to create a contour and fill it. And building on top of that elementary brick, you could somehow devise a naive approach of saying, well, to be able to transform an outline path into a stroking path, you would just have to take your stroking path, so the path in black on the little diagram at the bottom of the screen, and somehow expand it along the path of that black stroking path by redrawing or drawing an envelope around that path along the path of the pen you're moving along on the screen. And perpendicular to that movement, to that trajectory of the pen, you could draw a little line of the length from the desired width of the path along the stroking path. So you would just, expand, draw a little perpendicular line, perpendicular to the black one, and then the envelope, the drawing of the envelope of that, of both ends of that perpendicular line would give you the envelope, so the outline path into which you would fill with some color. So basically, you would end up with a red one, which is the stroking path you wanted, if you wanted a stroking path of color red with a size of 2, for example. And one just replaces the line with that rectangle counterpart. So that's amusingly, that's how the initial algorithm was described originally when you look into the bibliography a little bit. But also amusingly, that algorithm wasn't properly specified with a very sound theory and robust concepts. If you look into the bibliography, I'm giving a few pointers at the end of the talk. And so that naive strategy doesn't work well actually for paths which aren't lines, or more sophisticated paths like the well-known Tiger SVG image, or paths with curves, paths with sharp angles, and probably many other cases that I'm not listing here. So to fix that, the usual way is actually to cut that problem into many smaller pieces, and once until you get to a problem that you know how to fix, and then glue back everything else. So divide and conquer. So with the naive algorithm, we kind of know how to solve the problem for a line. So we just have to make each path look like a line. And that's what the reference paper that I'm quoting here does it. So you just take Bezier path and curves and everything. Once you know how to do that for those elementary building blocks, you know how to solve it generally, more or less. So I put an electronic version of that paper over here. And in a few more words, your algorithm is, well, you take a curve, you break it into a sequence of quadratic Bezier curves, so the well-known quads, in the up-clip package, and then you break each quad into a set of even smaller quads that can be approximated into lines. So you just say, I don't want my approximation, the error coming from that approximation to be greater than some value, and then you can get a collection of quads which approximates those lines with, well, that control error. And then you can turn each resulting line segment into a rectangle of the desired width, like in the naive algorithm, and then you fill all of those rectangles with the desired color. So done? No, of course not, because life isn't as simple as that, because you also need to handle the cusps in the path. So that's done in the algorithm that I've implemented by finding the inflection points in the curve. So taking the derivatives, first and second derivatives of those curves to detect when a path changes direction. And then you, of course, have to apply some special treatment to join back all of those inflection separate segments coming from those inflection points. And then you have to somehow stitch back together the two branches of the cusp into some aesthetical pleasing way. So you have a couple of options right now in Gio. So to use a bevel joint, a meter joint, or a room joint to stitch back together those two branches. So while glossing over some of the implementation details, and also a few fixes coming from floating point error propagation. And of course, thanks to the nice coding review process that we get in Gio, we managed to get something like that. So, well, you can see here a meter joint between those two branches, and here a bevel joint between those two branches, and then you have that somehow nice curve, which is quite, well, it's pleasantly looking for some definition of pleasantly looking. And here you have the new part of being able to be able to stroke a path. So you have this new type in the package upclip stroke, which takes a path, so the stroking path that you want to stroke, which is defined there in the Z function. So you create a clip path, and then you do it. You apply some transformation and some direction. And then once you have the clip path defined, you need to somehow finalize it. So by calling that end function, which will return a path specification, feeding it to the stroke type. And then you have also a new type, clip stroke style, sorry. Which takes the desired width of the stroke path, and also how you want to cap at the beginning and the end of the path, or how you want to finalize them, and how you want to join all of those little cusps traveling area in the stroke path. So here a bevel join. And then you provide that to the for example, to the paint fill function. So that was done for the stroking for the stroked path, but there was one final little wrinkle to apply or to develop, at least for the scientific plots that I was interested in. In those plots, it's quite useful to be able to also apply a dash pattern to a stroke. So here you have a pointed dash pattern for this red curve. And here you have a more complicated one in green, which can be barely visible. But well, for scientific plots, I had to implement that also. And here, basically the same strategy can be applied. So you can decompose a path into a set of paths which will be cut at the end of each element of the dashing pattern, and then apply the same stroking path recipe for each of those cut out subpaths. So for example, if you want to cut a line, a solid line like here in a dash pattern of 3 dashes, 2 empty dashes, 2 dashes, 20, then you just have to devise a way to describe that dash pattern, and then you just cut that solid line into well, 3 long, 2 empty, 2 empty, 2 solid, 2 empty, etc. And then, after a couple of PRs, we managed to get that somewhat nicely looking dashed stroking path strategy. And now, after that, I was quite happy. I could do all of the things that I wanted into GoP5, also in GNU-Plot to provide a Gio Canva, a Gio-based Canva for GNU-Plot, for later on perhaps having animations and that kind of stuff. And right now we have in GoP5 animations of bubbles colliding with other bubbles, and the famous solar system where you have the orbits which are drawn with those stroked paths. One interesting thing is that stroking path isn't actually a completely frozen research domain. It's still, every day now and then you have new algorithms being devised, and right now most of the development is coming from GPUs. GPU-oriented software developers, and you can actually get a few more interesting pointers on how to, possible improvement on stroking path implementation in Gio, basically, and the two last, the three links actually. One little update on the stroking path is that actually when the new compute backend that Elias was talking about earlier was introduced, to be tested on baked out, it uncovered a couple of bugs in the stroking path strategy, which was also uncovered by the Gio Canva package from Anthony. Basically it all boiled down to the old backend being a bit more lenient with how you would close the envelope path of the stroking path, because the algorithm was, because of the 32-bit floating-point error propagation, a straight line wouldn't always be converted into a rectangle, which would completely close the rectangle. So you would have a little gap between the start and the end of the envelope of the straight line, if you want, which the whole backend was more or less okay with. In the Gio Canva case, you could actually not give the expected visual rendering, but in most cases you would. And whereas the new compute backend would be much more stricter with how a closed shape should be, and it would always give unexpected visual results. So I believe that right now everything has been fixed, and of course, if you see some weird visual effects, well, please file the reports. And I think that I will stop here because I'm already past my 20 minutes budget. So I will give the links to the slides for later on if you want, because
All right.
as always I've provided much more material than my allotted time. But the
Well-
interesting bits are the biblio links here.
Well, thank you so much. This looks
Sure.
awesome. We can afford to take the next 5 minutes for questions if anyone has some. Alternatively, we can take the next 5 minutes to blitz through Go P5.
Okay. Let's share my screen. So Go P5 and not LaTeX. LaTeX will be another time, for another time. So yeah, Go P5, as I said earlier, is a Go port of the Java processing package, which is actually a way to start to learn programming with graphics. So you could program how to display a rectangle on screen, and it would display a rectangle on screen. And for Go P5, I've used Gio to do that. I actually based my Go P5 package on top of looking at the P5JS package, which is a JavaScript implementation of the original processing package. So I just looked at the P5JS API without trying to not too much depart from that API yet. But because that API is full of globals, you have just top-level functions which have some hidden state. At some point, I will, move all of those globals into a dedicated, let's say, easy P5 package, and have the much more cleaner API for some definition of that in the P5 package per se. So, for example, the hello world of the P5 package right now is that. So you have a top-level run function, which takes two functions as parameters. The setup one, which is called once you start your little program. And then you have a draw function, which will be called every time a new frame has to be drawn on the screen. So here, for example, you have a little program which does more or less what this Hello thingy was showing earlier. And so you have a way to specify the dimensions of the Canva window that you want, then the background of the background color of that Canva, and then you can specify the color of the struct path, the width of that struct path, the color, the filling color of that of the current shape, etc., etc. And so you have, it's just function without too much structure, let's say. So at some point, I will just expose a much more type-oriented API. And that's more or less what I said, except, you have a way to retrieve the mouse position inside the Canva. So you can also retrieve the events propagated by Gio for the mouse buttons clicked or not, which one, and also a way to have the previous mouse position, so you can have nice visual effects if you want. I already got a couple of interested parties providing a few pull requests, so that's nice. And for the future developments of P5, obviously for the physics simulation stuff, I will need a few things from Gio and or either in Gio or in P5. But for Gio, from the Gio point of view, I will need at some point to be able to drag and drop, for example, to take a new particle, a charged particle, and put it into an electromagnetic field and see the effects of that particle, charged particle, with its interaction with the EM field, and have the ISO lines of that field being somehow modified. But so to be able to pick a charged particle, put it into some EM field, and have that drag and drop functionality somehow working. Also the viewport, so that's, I think, Chris already implemented for the Galaxy example extracted from GNOME. And this will be, for example, needed for the solar system view to be able to zoom in, zoom out, and pan in and out in the solar system to see the Pluto X planet in the solar system while still seeing the Earth, for example. And also a couple of GUI widgets like file selection and drop-down menus for example, to create new charged particles and then drag and drop those. And that's all that I wanted to say about GoP5.
All right. Well, that's truly fantastic work. Thank you so much for sharing that. The viewport I implemented does not do all of those things, but I'm happy to work with you if you want to try to make that better, and we can try and promote that into X. Yeah, I agree with Elias. Drawing LaTeX would be really interesting to hear about. So I think we will now hand things off to Pierre, who's going to talk about implementing a file picker for Gio.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for inviting me. Very excited to show what I've been up to. So I'm Pierre Curto, and I do, let's say, program as a hobby. This is not my daily job, although it has helped me in a few instances. And today I'm going to present you with a file selection widget, which I've been working on for some of the apps that I'm thinking of doing or that I've started doing or prototyping. This is still a work in progress, but it is fully functional. So let's start with sharing my screen. Okay, I need to authorize the browser. Actually, first time I use my own laptop to do this.
I'm guessing this is a macOS must restart browser in order for it to gain new privileges kind of scenario. So hopefully Pierre will reappear. Okay. All right, it's working. We can see your screen.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, sorry about that. I had to restart my browser. So let's start with a couple of slides just to explain the context. So basically, I started working on this quite a while ago, actually. But it was more getting a feeling of Gio and see what could be done or not. But then I as I was saying, I was working on a couple of apps for personal use, and one of the item that I kept running into was missing a way of getting a file access directly from the application. So I started prototyping a few ways of doing that, and then eventually I decided to use a specific way of selecting those files, which is close to what you would find in any other standard desktop application, with a few tweaks of my own that I quite like in the way I work. So hopefully this will also be useful for someone else. So basically the intent was to provide a missing widget that I think is quite important and pretty much required for any desktop, at least desktop applications, not only for my personal use, but obviously for everyone else. So with that in mind, I decided to start the work, and I wanted it to be embeddable. So not a modal window, but something that could be embedded in any window, so that you could basically manage it the way you wanted it to be, and make it flexible so that you can use it for single file selection, which is probably the main use case, but also for multiple files. Or when I say file, I mean in a generic sense of the term. So it could be a real file or a directory. There's no real distinction. I wanted it to be exclusively dependent on Gio, although that has proven to be difficult because in the end I had to introduce 2 new items which are not part of the Gio package, which I've listed down below. And obviously keep it simple in terms of API and in line with what Gio does and how it exposes specifically the layout method. And basically 2 extra items that I had to write and that I have extracted from this because I think they're quite useful. The first one is the list wrap widget. I've got one prototype of that in the outlay package from Chris. I have improved it so that it's actually scrollable now. And the idea of the list wrap is to basically resemble what you have currently in the Gio package as a list in the layout package, but being able not only to display a single item on a line or on a row, but multiple ones. Because basically, as you will see in the demo, when I display files, I can have quite long lists. So I wanted to make use of all the screen estate that was available. And I thought that the list wrap was a good answer to that. And then the other piece was a resizable widget. So basically, there are several areas in the file widget, and you may want to resize some of them to give more room to display files or to display directories or a few other things. So that was something that I implemented mainly to use with the flex layouts, but it could actually be used for any other kind of layouts. But it works very well with the flex ones. So before I jump into the demo and show you how it looks and what it can do, I'm going to show you the actual the current API that I have for it. So I have a package called JOX, which hosts this widget, and that's the file one that you see here. So as you can see, it's very simple. Basically, you have the layout method. Currently, it is based on the theme, material theme, which is not great. I'm going to work on it to actually split it to be independent from the theme. It's not going to be easy, but I think it's doable. And that's about it. And then the other method is once the file has been selected, is the selected method in order to retrieve the file or files, actually paths that have been selected. So very simple. On the structure itself, on the type itself, I have a main path field, which is basically where to start from, which path to start from. I also have a selection type, which is really saying what do you want to do with the widget. You want it to be selected one file, one directory, or multiple files or multiple directories. So that's what this is for. And then, and this is something I'm not too happy with. Basically, the way the widget is built means that I need quite a few set of colors, not that many, but a few of them to be able to distinguish the different areas that we have in the widget, and I'll show that in a minute. So basically, I've built in a couple of palettes here. One is to display error messages. Obviously, if you can't access a file or open a directory, you need to be able to display a message, and I want colors for that. Same for here, the two other palettes, the main and area. Those are the two main pieces that need to be colored differently in order to be, nice and look nice. So that's what I've built. I don't think it's the right way to do it, but that's how it is for the time being, and I'm open for better suggestions and ways of doing that. And that's the current API. Quite simple, probably incomplete, but I'll show you now what it does. So I have the code here, and I start the example that only displays a file widget window, which looks like this. So you have, let's say, four main areas. At the top level, you see the path where you are. So basically the path field that we saw earlier on, so where we started. So I'm in the GIO directory. Then the second part of the screen is really split in two. The directories in here, so you can recognize the various directories in the GIO package, and the files. And then below, we have the actual, because I've selected here the ability to provide one single file, to select one single file. So I could type the name of the file, for instance, or I could navigate around and select a file. In order to select a file right now, again, it's not ideal, but couldn't find a better way for the time being. I need to hold the Control key and select the file that I want. If I were to select a directory, which I can't here because I've put it into single file selection, we would do the same, but on the directory, one directory here. And you can navigate from the path window here, or area rather, or from the directory area here. So for instance, I can drill down into the packages and go to the window one, internal package, where you can see there's a couple more files. So there's actually 36 of them here. And you can scroll around. And as you can see here, I'm using the list wrap to generate this view. So basically here for the list, we have 3 columns, and we have a certain number of files displayed per column. That's what the list wrap does. So it tries to display as many files as it can on one axis. And then when it reaches the end, it has no more room, then it will go to the next one. And that means that it's scrollable here horizontally. It can be done vertically, and I'll show you that in a minute. I also put some visual cues as to not how long the list is, but is there any more items in the list that are not displayed? So if I resize the window, I can scroll and I can see that I've got some items this way or that way. That's one way of showing it. I didn't want to use scroll bars. Obviously, it's quite easy to do, especially with the one that is in the X package. But I wanted the window to be as light as possible, and I think scroll bars tend to add quite a few of dead space So I didn't want to use those. But of course, it's open for discussion. Now, the way I also work when I work with files is that I want to have an overview of all the files that are available within the directory, which is what you get here. But sometimes I want to select a file based on when it was created or how big it is. So for instance, if I want to have those details, I can click here on this part of the toolbar here, and I can open up the detail view. Since I don't have any directory, I'm going to hide this piece here by clicking here. And now I have a vertical view of all the files with their details. So this is broken down by name without extension, the extension, because that's also something that I tend to use a lot. The size, which is represented by default in human view, so by kilobytes, megabytes, or whatever. And also for the date when the file was last changed, and the permissions. The nice thing is, if you want to have a non-human view, like the default view, which would be like number of the size of the files in bytes, you can hold the control key and click on the header here, and it will change it to the details in bytes here without the kilobytes or megabytes view. Same for the date. So here I have relative to the current time, but it could be the actual date, absolute date. Obviously, as I sometimes also work on files that keep changing, and I may have a various set of those, and I need to select maybe the biggest one or the smallest one. So I want to be able to sort the files based on those criteria. So basically, if I click on a column here, I can sort by whatever I select. So the header here. So now is in ascending order. If I click again, it will be in descending order. So from the largest file to the smallest one. And I can have multiple sorts. So for instance, if I go back to ascending order, there are a couple of files which have the same size. So for instance, there's two files, but they are not in alphabetical order, which is not a problem here because I only have got two of them. But when I have a lot of them, I want to sort them by name because they may contain some information that will make it easier to retrieve. So I can also sort by a second criteria, which would be the name in here. And as you can see, it gives me here the order in which the files are sorted. So sorted by size first, the one here, and then by name, which is the second one here. And then in which case, for those, then they get sorted alphabetically here by size. Now, one nice thing as well is, if I look at the actual details of those files, you can see that they don't have the exact same size. So in fact, if I start sorting by size with this view, you will see that they will not get the same order because they don't have the exact same size. But previously, as I was using let's say the human view of the size in kilobytes, they were all, both of them were at 2.1 kilobytes, meaning that they are actually, from that sense, the same size. So that's quite handy because sometimes you have files of a couple of megabytes, and you want to group them by size, and you want to sort them then through extension or name or whatever. And it's nice to have those files grouped by size, not the exact figure, but just the total number of megabytes. So that's quite nice. And it's quite easy to do actually, but I find that so useful. So that's the detail view. I call that the detail view, where I can see and check the various properties of the file size, time, and permissions. Right. So this is the main view. Now, when I use file selectors as well, what I often do is navigate in a few different places. So what I've built in here, which is hidden away by default, is a history window here, where I can see all the directories that I've been clicking on. So you can see I started in GIO, which is the first item. And then the latest one was the window one, which is where we are. And I went down through the app and internal. So here I have a view with a limited size that can be modified to all the previous paths that I used. So I can go back to the GIO directory directly from here. And I'll show the directory view now to show you something else. As I navigate in the file system, maybe sometimes I will hit places where I don't have access. So for instance, here, I haven't given Goland the right to open the download directory. So whenever I click that, then I get an error. So this is why I was saying earlier on I needed a specific palette for this, because I wanted to have it with a red background and being visible. So here what I'm doing is just displaying this error message for a couple of seconds, and then using an invalidate operation, a delayed invalidate operation, to actually remove it after a while. So that's how errors are handled, or errors are handled the same way. Another interesting piece is that you can search the files as well. So this is actually very crude, very simple. So the search item menu is here for directories or for files, and it works the same way. So it opens up an input, a text input widget here, when I can start looking for files. Actually, I will go back to the window one because I have quite a few of those. I'm going to close this. And I can search for Wayland type files, for instance. So this is the Wayland files. So it will look for all the files that match whatever I input in here. It's very, very simple. I mean, just a single word search in here. Ideally, I would like to be able to search on size or time, or multiple words, etc. But haven't had the time to actually implement that. So, but that's the basics for it. As you can see as well, if I go back to the GIO directory again, you see at the bottom here, there's a small indication of how many items are displayed. So in this window, we have 13 directories displayed out of 16. So by default, it will not show the hidden files. So basically the ones that start with dot on Unix type file systems, or the files the same way. But you can show them if need be by clicking here, and then it will show everything that is hidden away by default. And then finally, you could, and that's more useful when you want to select a directory, but it might be also useful when you want to select a file, create a directory in here, which would basically allow me to navigate to and then put a file in here. Yeah, there's no selection in the input widget, which is something that I'm missing a lot. But I know that Larry is working on this, I think. So test file, for instance, and that would basically then when you call the selected method, it will give you a slice with a single item, which would have a path of this /test.file, and that would be the file to be selected in here. And then actually one final piece that I've put in here is the way of making bookmarks. So for instance, if I want to keep track of the directories I keep working on, I can put it in here. So again, holding the control key, it will put it into this window, and I can navigate to it at any point in time. And if I want to remove it, I just control click it, and it will select it from that list. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's been a lot of fun building this, and it's actually very nice to work with GIO. It's got a very slick API, I think, and I try to be as slick as it is. Not simple sometimes. Obviously, this is a work in progress. It still requires a couple of things. So basically, it works on Windows, although I'm missing being able to select multiple drives. So currently it will just work on the drive that it was started with. No way to change drives. So eventually I may get around to that. And a couple of items I would like to work on to improve the widget. One would be to be able to export the state. So an application might want to keep the file selector file selection widget state. So basically the history I was showing, the bookmarks as well. And then, I didn't show how to actually resize the windows. That's quite something quite useful. So here you can drag and drop the various handles here to resize the windows to fit your taste and whatever you're displaying. So being able to also save those within the state, and being able to change the state maybe directly from the file selector. I'm not too sure about that yet. Improve the search item, as I was mentioning, and of course better themes. The one you see here is pretty dull. It's basically a gray, only grayish type colors. It's not very nice, but I'm not too good at colors, so this is something I need help on. And then eventually, this is actually how I started. I started implementing it based on the new incoming IOFS package in 1.16, in Go 1.16, and being able to basically browse anything. So not only file system, but anything that resembles the file system, or at least that satisfies the interfaces here, so that you could basically browse a remote file system or an SFTP, a server or things like that, which would be quite useful, I think. So those are the items I'm thinking of. Could be quite a few more things as well, but that's what I currently have in mind. I don't mind any help as well, just to review the code or to provide more feature or fix bugs. I'm sure there are some. The package is hosted on SourceHut in here. You can have a look around. In that, I actually have a few other things that I would like to share as well at some point, but this is not for today's talk. And finally, as a conclusion, I would say that Gio is very, very capable, even though its API is very simple, very dry, I think. You can do a lot of things with it, but I still think that it would be nice to have higher level widgets, such as a file selector, such as a tree. As you could see, I'm missing that a lot as well for the application I'm building, and maybe one or two other things like scroll bars or typical things like that, which would be much higher level widgets than what we currently have in the material package, for instance, or in the widget package. But I think people are definitely missing those type of widgets. So I'm not sure what the view is on this. But in the meantime, if you want to play around with it, please give it a try and let me know on Slack or on email by email what you think. Thank you very much.
Wow. That is really an amazingly sophisticated widget. And from my small experience doing similar stuff in the used to be called materials package, I know how much work that is. So that's really incredible stuff. Thank you. Elias said in chat, like we agree we need higher level widgets, but it's hard to both build the plumbing and the porcelain at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I understand. I mean, we need to get the foundation right first, and that's a priority for sure.
But that doesn't mean they're not parallelizable, especially because the API boundary is so clear at the ops layer. We're already, making some progress towards those high-level functions. Anthony, the eye icon reveals hidden files.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you so much. I'm afraid that we ate all your time for questions at the end of the presentation, but it was really great stuff. So at this point, we're gonna transition into office hours. I think I'm going to pause the recording, or I'm gonna stop and maybe restart the recording. So